Hey everyone, welcome to the Smiling Homeschooler podcast. We're glad you can join us. Before we get going, we just want to say thank you to Teaching Textbooks for helping make the Smiling Homeschooler possible. They're an amazing math curriculum and an amazing partner. We really appreciate their support and partnering with us. So go check them out over at teachingtextbooks.com. Also to Samaritan Ministries, a community of Christians that pay one another's medical bills, helping families take a safe step of faith as they feel God's leading in career or ministry changes, or in bringing mom home. You can learn more at samaritanministries.org/familyman, and we'd encourage you to go check them out. All right, Dad, if you're ready, go ahead and get started. Let's go.
I am. Well, where we live here in northern Indiana, spring refuses to come. It is just like battling winter, and winter seems to be winning. It was supposed to snow yesterday, and I've talked to my friends. I was talking to Gary Bloom from Books Bloom, which is a great resource for all books used and used. But he was saying where they are in Virginia, it was like 80 degrees today. I was talking to another friend down in Florida. It was like 90 yesterday. And our house, I think it was supposed to snow. In fact,
It was
on
22
Sunday,
this
I
morning.
did see some snow hitting the windshield. So, and I know there are places worse than Indiana. I just can't imagine why anybody would want to live there.
The part that's hard is, like today I was looking out my window at work, and it's just, there's a park right behind me. It's gorgeous green grass. Everything's coming back. I'm like, man, I just want to go, like, it was sunny, roll around in the grass, but it's like 28 degrees, even though it looks just so wonderful. So definitely kind of a bummer. But
And just 1 year ago today, my son Ike reminded us, was the solar total eclipse. And I mean, seemed like that was summer. I would have said that happened in the summertime.
the funny part is, like, most things I feel like fly by. Like, there was something the other day that I was looking at. I was like, I can't even believe that. But this one, I would have sworn it was 2 years ago for some reason. But I was also just coming out of, like, having a baby a month old. So maybe, I kind of fogged
But it was
over
warm.
there.
Remember? It
Yeah,
was
really
warm,
warm.
man. It was just
a great
like,
day.
I mean, I think there are pictures of
That was really fun.
some of the kids in shorts, and it was just and not compared to today, doesn't even seem possible.
Not quite.
Doesn't
Ike,
even seem possible.
you mentioned Ike, though, and him reminding. The other day, he sent a text, and he reminded us all that I just crossed over, 1 billion seconds or minutes?
Yeah,
seconds alive. He apparently said a reminder a few months ago. He said it like 10 years ago, so I believed it, but because he would do something like that, but it was actually just like a few months ago. But so yeah, I guess that's a big milestone. I finally crossed over. But he likes to say, likes to remind people of that. Well, we also, this last week was the second youngest kid, Cal's birthday, yesterday actually. But Sunday we went bouldering, which is like rock climbing without the ropes. And I hadn't done that since Cal was 4, I'm pretty sure. I was like 15 years ago. But it was super, super fun. I was super sore the next couple days. My arms are still very tight, but that was
But enough about
fun.
that. Let's talk about grip strength.
Yeah,
because they had a little thing that you could test their grip. So all these teenagers and 20-somethings, and even my co-host here, they all tested it. And how did they do? Not as good as me. Not as good as me. Yeah.
It is fun to still have something that, have something you can way better than everyone else, except Sam. Sam has...
That's true.
He is pretty impressive, but...
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, we should get in there because we got a bunch of this. And you said someone sent you an email, or was it a Facebook message that kind of spawned
somebody
tonight's
sent me a Facebook
topic?
message, and they said this. I don't know if she's kind of talking about some other suggestions, but she said, this has been hard on me, not just today, but for a while now, because it makes me think that I must have failed her. Oh, maybe I didn't read the whole thing. Oh, here's the whole thing. Sorry. Ben can edit this out. In regards to the question you asked on Facebook, my biggest struggle at the moment is that my oldest daughter, 15, wants to go to public high school for the next 3 years, or next year. There's a 3 in there too. I don't want that for her, but my husband is okay with it. She's been homeschooled the whole time, and she just likes it and is not glad for her time being homeschooled. This has given me much grief and heartache. I don't know if you have any suggestions in regards to this, but this has been hard on me, not just today, but for a while now, because it makes me think that I must have failed her along the way. I still have 3 other sons behind her, and I'd like to continue to homeschool them because I know that home is best for them. But with my daughter being as she is, it makes me question if I'm doing the right thing. Anyway, I don't know if you have any experience of this in the past or have any words of wisdom with regards to this. Thank you. I appreciate your podcast as it often encourages me. And fortunately for her, I don't have to have words of wisdom to talk about it. So, I can just answer any question. But I do have some thoughts on this because I think about this a lot. And we've even kind of talked about it. I think we mentioned it even maybe last podcast that we hear this often where maybe teenagers, usually they're very social, and they say to their parents, I want to go to school. And I know that some parents are like, well, okay, if that's what you want to do, which I will say right up front, I would never, ever do that because I know my kids aren't wise enough to know what's best for themselves. But I've also had parents who say, yeah, and I can remember one specific conversation with this mom and just a super, I would say, educated mother. She went to college, a very prestigious college, a sharp person. And I can remember her saying, with tears in her eyes, my son says I'm not qualified to teach him. And and that he's missing out on a better education and that, his friends go to school and they're not affected by all the stuff and he'd be just fine. And so several years ago, we decided that, hey, we've had enough of these people who've said these kind of things, that we needed to write a book. We needed to put some of these thoughts together. And so we wrote a book called Lies Homeschool Teens Believe, similar in title to our Lies Homeschool Moms Believe, but we changed one word. And they're different, totally different lies, but they are lies. They're lies that have been whispered into their head that maybe the world has said, maybe their friends have said, and they start to say them to themselves. And I asked Ben, I said, hey, how about we just kind of go through the outline of the book and just talk about some of these lies and then talk about the truth that accompanies that lie or combats that lie, confronts that lie. And I should say, these are not just for teenagers. These are for all kids who are sometimes say hurtful things like this mom, because she doesn't just hear it as my daughter wants to go to school. She hears it as you're doing a bad job and it's your fault, so I want to go do something else. That's a lie too, mom, that you're believing. Sometimes our kids don't always say that. So I just thought we'd kind of go down through them. Does that sound like a good plan, Ben?
Yep.
Okay, let's just look at the first one. Lie number one. They believe the lie that other kids are getting a better education than me. I feel like other kids are getting a better education than me. That's a lie. Because for some reason, our homeschooled kids who have never tasted from the putrid waters of the public school think that somehow real learning is taking place. And I know for you, Ben, you've never been to any other school but homeschool. But I would guess it's not hard for you to believe that they are believing a lie that is not true, because I was there. I was in those public schools. I was in a good public school. And I'll tell you, the education I was received wasn't better than anybody else. It was exactly like everyone else's. It didn't matter if my bent was design and, graphics and plants. I liked landscaping. I was told I should be a chemical engineer. I mean, if that doesn't blow my Ben, he can't even keep the smile off his face.
Well,
because
I was thinking,
there could not be. Go ahead.
Wasn't one of your classmates Laura Ingalls? Wasn't she in that same time too? Yeah, I can't remember.
Ow!
I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. But we talked about this last week, I think it was. So if you haven't listened to that
I used
episode,
to call her Half Pint.
that's right. You should check it out because we were talking about Brian Ray, who's done a lot of research on this, which is totally just debunked lie across the board. I mean, homeschooling is considered very effective at training your children. Now, maybe they won't be as good at passing some of those tests, but that doesn't really matter. Even if that was the level of what we're going to be measuring against. But when it comes to functioning in life, excitement to learn, ability to interact with people, ability to lead their family, or be a good wife, or be a good mom, or a husband, or whatever it may be, your children are going to excel and easily be, even if you just talk about academics, but the rest as well. And those are the things that really do count. So, but
I'm gonna be a little stronger than Ben, because Ben was kind of saying the important things your kids are gonna, but I'm gonna even say in the non-important things like academics, your kids are gonna get a better education. They just 100%. Are. It is because a teacher, my good old chemistry teacher, who is now a homeschool teacher, Mr. Thompson, who was a young guy, didn't have a family, wasn't married back when. I mean, he had to spend half his time trying to get the attention of the class, because they were, laughing and doing things they shouldn't. They were cheating. They were, doing damage to public or to school property. And again, I would say the truth is that I want my kids to know is that I'm better education. All over here. I'm better educated because I am homeschooled. Because I would say that, and I've seen that in all my kids, all their strengths, we educated. When, Ben, I mean, he's a history guy. He knows more about history than anybody I have ever met. I mean, that's true. He's smiling and laughing, but it's true. I mean, he doesn't just know, like, when the date was. I don't even know if he knows the date. But he knows the flow. He knows the generals' names. He knows how it all worked. He knows those. I never did. Sam, when he was in his training to be an animator, these people who'd gone to a 4-year art school, most of them had, or even an animation school, would say to Sam, how do you know what you're doing? How do you know so much? And he'd say, I don't know. I learned it in my bedroom, because we just gave him opportunities. Same thing with Kat, and she was into hair and, cutting it. She was just ahead because we let her do all those things. I've seen it with all my kids, Yeah.
So anyway, all I'm saying though is I think don't be discouraged if you see a random, test or something where some kid knew something. Like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, just because you see something where you're like, oh man, my kid wouldn't know that, but they say that's what a 6th grader knows. Just don't think that, because you are way ahead no matter what thing you compare against. I could probably fail a 7th grade history test, but that doesn't mean I know less history than they are. And I think you need to kind of, something that I think mom and dad did good is, it's not like instilling you're better than other people, because that is absolutely not a good thing to have. But you do need to have a little bit of like, I'm confident that what we're doing is good. I do think that really does help, because otherwise you are going to have kind of that feeling of doubt of what they're doing. And it's tough. I mean, I 100%, seen that so many times. And I think, something that was kind of making me think about that was, trying to instill, and maybe this actually might go under one of the other ones, but is why you're doing it. Just keep reminding them that constantly, of the importance of why you are homeschooling. You don't want them to get to high school and just be like, yeah, it's just because mom wanted to do it, or because she thinks she can teach me better. There's a lot more at stake than that. So I think your kids really, really, really believing it is important.
Yeah. Hey, so far we've only gotten through one of these, and we're ready to take a commercial break. But we would just want to thank Samaritan Ministries for being part of today's show. I know a lot of you who consider being part of this biblically based healthcare sharing ministry, but the fear of something new and different has kept you from pulling the trigger. Let your old buddy Todd reassure you that you have nothing to fear and have lots to gain. You don't have to be afraid, because we've been members of Samaritan Ministries for 15 years and know it works. Start the conversation at SamaritanMinistries.org/FamilyMan.
And we also want to say thank you to Teaching Textbooks for making the Smiling Homeschooler possible. As you know, you're coming around to the end of the school year, thinking about next year, definitely make sure to include Teaching Textbooks as part of your curriculum. If you're going to a homeschooling convention, you can check them out there. They're at every convention basically out there. They have an amazing team and they're an amazing company, and they really do an amazing job at teaching math. So if you're struggling, if your kids are struggling during math time, give them a shot, and they have a free trial and awesome options over at teachingtextbooks.com. Well, lie number 2, Dad, is my mom, this is the kid saying this, my mom isn't qualified to teach me. Which, you know, again, is literally what you were just saying this kid was saying, you know. Just such a sad one, because I totally get that. That is such a hurtful thing. Even if your kid doesn't know anything that they're talking about, and you know, doesn't mean that he doesn't love you or she doesn't love you or anything like that. But it's just, you know, we say stupid things as kids, and
remember that it is a 14-year-old kid.
Exactly.
I had a girl come up to me one time who was probably 14 or 15, and she goes, I mean, dead serious. And she probably is going to make a great homeschool mom one day, but she looked at me and she goes, so what makes you qualified to teach all these parents? And I was stunned. I was just like, I didn't almost, and I'm like, I just said, because I am, you know, and she was just like, what did she want from me? Like a
child.
degree? Yeah, I just like, like I said, she's probably a homeschool mom now, but you know, I think that's what we've been fed, that you have to be an electrician to replace a light bulb. You have to be a landscape architect to landscape. You have to you have to be a licensed teacher to be a good teacher. And that is not true.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean, now those things, are there people who could do it better? Sure. But in parenting, there's no one who can do it better than you, because you are their parent. Boom. And in teaching, you know, who cares? Like, I think there's this thing that people also often think, though, is that you have to know everything you're going to teach your child from day one, and know it all the way through. You know, if you're getting to something where you're going to do science curriculum, you don't have to know all the science stuff before you start the first page. If you really want to, and you want to feel like you've done more, read the page the day before or 10 minutes before, just so you have something, because that's totally fine. Like there's so many things out there to help you. You don't have to just be figuring everything out all the time. And regardless of that, the core is, you know your child the best. You're going to be able to teach. You've already done it. This is not rocket science, you know, the stuff that we're teaching our kids, and that is absolutely fine. And again, going back to Brian Ray, going back to all these other experts and stuff, homeschooling kids are extremely successful. They do great and everything else, and those are all taught by their moms as well. So you're not some unique thing where you're less capable than any other mom out there. And I get the fear. It's 100%. Legitimate thing that everyone struggles with at some point, probably, but don't give in.
Yeah. and I've shared this probably a dozen times before, but it's worth saying every single time. You know, I've had so many moms, and I had a mom the last convention I was at who said she was a public school teacher she said a lot of years, and maybe COVID forced her into homeschooling her own kids, and she loves it. But she said, nothing prepared me for homeschooling my own kids. You know, so it was not like, oh, because she was so prepared, you know, such a great teacher of others' kids, that it was easy to teach her own kids, because that's not true. Okay, here's the third lie that the kid might say, is that I'm missing out on all kinds of fun. And I will say that's true. You know, because you are homeschool, you are going to miss out on some of the fun of school, because really that's, you know, I've even had other people say, well, I mean, isn't it too bad that your kids are going to miss out on, you know, going to school dances and you know, art projects and having a locker, which they seem to say that locker thing a lot, you know. And I will say the homeschool kids don't know how to open a combination lock, but they can be taught, you know. And the truth is, yes, they're going to miss out on lots of different activities that a public school kid had. But the truth is, they're going to have lots of fun things that are unique to homeschooling, just as good or better memories. You know, their memories are not going to be with a bunch of kids, you know, some of those that I might have. They're going to be with their family and doing amazing things. My kids have memories of homeschool memories of traveling all over the country. and seeing amazing museums and going to amazing factory tours and all those things. That is true. They're not going to have the same, but they will have even better.
Yeah, and they're not going to have the same or they're not going to have the I kind of blanked on how I was going to say it, but basically they're going to miss out on a bunch of the crummy stuff too. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, you talk to any kid in that age range, and it's a joke about how much stuff is going on. And obviously, you can't shield them and protect them from everything, but that doesn't mean you have to throw them into everything as well. I mean, and the other thing that Dad mentioned earlier is it does really make a huge difference if all of their friends are all in school and that's all they know. You're going to probably deal with that a lot. I mean, it would be my guess. I know I felt it more when I was around a bunch of people who were in school. That's 100% going to be true. But, again, as Ed said, they're 14 or they're 15 or they're 16 or they're 17. They don't, you're not doing this just because of fun. That's not the goal through all of this. I don't really think anywhere we've always said that the goal for homeschooling and the goal for parenting is just fun. There's more at stake. So if you believe you're homeschooling for a reason outside of fun, then you should stick to that regardless of the fun argument.
Yeah. And I would say too, and maybe we can kind of wrap this up. We only made it through 4 of these. Maybe we'll do one more, but I would say, I think Ben is exactly right. If your kid is not around other homeschooled kids, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, we were around some kids who all went to public school. They were saying to my kids, "Hey, wouldn't you like to go to school too? Isn't it too bad that you have to be homeschooled?" And so we jotted a quick email to their parents and said, "Hey, whatever you want to do with your kids is fine, but could you tell your kids not to say those things to my kids anymore, because that's hard to stand up against." And really, when we wrote this book, Lies Homeschool Teens Believe, we put a little group study guide inside of it, because I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you could have your homeschool co-op, all the teenagers or the 8th graders or whatever, do it together, because I think they could be a great force for saying, man, we're homeschooled. This is a good thing. And they could encourage each other in that.
It's tough because, I mean, at that age range, like kids, they're the most susceptible to pressure, outside pressures ever, probably. I mean, it's so easy. I mean, there's a million things about peer pressure and all that. So, wanting to make a huge, major life-altering change because of that peer pressure is something that hopefully you've been instilling, and I hope I do. That's something I really think a lot about, is that we're not just going to give in to the pressures of, oh, we need to act like this, which kind of leads into our next one, which is people are going to think I'm weird because I'm homeschooled. And again, COVID happened 5 years ago. Everyone was homeschooled for a while. There's weird kids everywhere. You're always going to be, whether they're public schooled, homeschooled, private schooled, anything. There's always going to be odd kids. You watch anything that portrays a public school, go to a public school, there's going to be a bunch of kids that everyone makes fun of and bullies and all that. So, the other thing, and I've talked to coworkers about this many, many times, is I don't really care if I have to be exactly like those. I don't want to be exactly like those. That's the whole point of why we're not at public school. But no, I think the whole idea of what it used to be is the kids, who are just the weirdest of all. It's just baloney. But that's, no one else really
cares. And I will say,
nowadays.
I go to a lot of homeschool conventions, and there are a lot of weird homeschoolers. Yeah. But hey, the good news is, if you're one of those, you'd be weird anyway. It doesn't really matter.
That's what I mean.
And that's okay. It's your family. And I get it, because there are some kids who don't want to look homeschooled. They'll say, oh, that's a homeschool family. And, we all know what that means. If you don't, that's roughly your family. And I remember Ben, it was hard for him when we would be out with just our family. And I can remember one time, and I've probably told the story before, but we're having our picture taken, and Ben's way over to the side. And I'm like, Ben, what are you doing? And he goes, I don't know. Everybody's looking at us. He goes, I just don't. And I said, don't you like our family? He goes, no, I love our family. He goes, I just don't like when everybody looks at us. He felt weird. And so I was at that point, I was like, okay. And so now I can remember we took this picture at south of the border, which is just into South Carolina, and it's got this giant gorilla with an orange, and our whole family's standing there, and Ben's like 20 feet away over on the edge, and I'm like, that's okay.
Yeah, but he's also the one who would, I'd be like, Dad, you're just being so loud. And he'd be like, why am I being, and just start yelling or something just to draw attention. So,
Exactly. But I will say, because my dad used to say this all the time, because I get it, especially I think it's heightened. That's a heightened fear as a teenager, because I had longer hair, and when I was a teenager, it wasn't because I wanted to be cool. It was because I didn't want to stand out. I did not want to stand out. And my dad used to say to me all the time, he still probably says it. He said, I'd say, Dad, I can't go out like looking like this. Look at my hair. And my hair did look terrible because my mom cut it. And he would say, no one's looking at you. He goes, they're all looking at me. And what he meant was really everybody else is thinking about their own selves. They don't care. And, for those kids who think, oh, everybody's going to think I'm weird because the truth is, nobody cares whether you're homeschooled or not. There are so many people who are homeschooled now. It's just it's like a non-discussion anymore. Right. And so I think, just keep reminding your kids, like my dad reminds me, they're not looking at you, which is true.
Yeah. It's just foolish. I mean, it's something that I regret, and that's something that I feel like now I'm really, really like, I don't know. It's a big deal to me is the peer pressure thing, because I just think it's just so sad and so stupid. But we all go through it, and some people a lot more than others, maybe. But it's a bummer, But I was wrong, and now I totally really appreciate everything that we have, and had as
sometimes he stands within 10 feet of our family.
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm not completely cured. There's still limits, but it's a tough one. But don't let them.
Just keep talking to your kids.
Yeah,
keep talking to them, and don't give up on them, and don't assume just because they believe the lies, that makes them bad or anything like that. It is things that we feel as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old are not the same things that we're going to feel as a 30-year-old.
And I would say,
thankfully,
just listen if they're, ranting or raving about something that they're just freaking out about. That's obviously not true. That, maybe it's just a fear they're working through, whatever. I mean, it's a volatile time as a teen. A lot of these are believed more as teens than like 7-year-olds, but, if they feel, I think, truly listened to, usually that de-escalates, usually you start calming down, and then you can actually talk. And I mean, there's very few times, I hope, that Dad would say that after like talking through it, that I was just like, nope, I think everything you just said is completely wrong. I'm sure I did, but I think in the quiet moments, they'll realize the truth of it, and and see your heart. So
I agree.
But yeah.
Well, hey, this is a good place to stop. I say, Ben, we maybe continue this conversation because I think it's a good one. So I hope you'll join us next time as we talk a few more, discuss some of the lies homeschooled teens believe and the truths that they need to believe and that we need to share with them. So again, you can get the book, Lies Homeschooling Teens Believe, at thesmilinghomeschooler.com. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a great week. I hope it's nice and springy there, and I hope you're smiling a lot.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to Teaching Textbooks for making the Smiling Homeschooler possible. Go support them over at teachingtextbooks.com. Also, thank you to Samaritan Ministries, a community of Christians that pay one another's medical bills, helping families take a safe step of faith as they feel God's leading career or ministry changes, or in bringing mom home. You can learn more at samaritanministries.org/familyman. But all right, everyone, have a great week, and don't forget to smile.